Okay, hello, it's March 10th, and my last couple videos, I did a video on the upcoming Sun-Neptune-Mercury conjunction, and then I made another video talking about the square between Neptune and Mars. And now, this video, in a sense, will be like the third in a series, or maybe the second in a series, considering this is a complicated dynamic between four planets, three of which are conjunct, and the other of which is squaring the three that are conjunct. And there's a couple of ideas that I was introducing, namely some stuff about Marshal McLuhan, and the basis for introducing Marshal McLuhan is that Marshal McLuhan has Sun conjunct Neptune, although it's not in Pisces, but you know that's how you go with these Neptune things, right? But McLuhan has a Sun-Neptune conjunction, as pointed out by Rick Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche. And after recording this video, the first one where I was talking about McLuhan, I like to do this thing where I make annotations and notes to my videos, where after I spend however long, half an hour or so, talking about stuff, I will listen to the things that I say, and can I live with having this crap on the internet, first of all, and also to go through it and and make notes and references, because even I figure that's kind of like added value, that even if my own attempts at giving you some sort of insightful thing falls short, then at least there's an opportunity to click some of the links, and then you might find something else that's cool. And I don't even know if I'd seen the whole McLuhan medium is the massage, not to be confused with the medium is the message, but the film The Medium is the Massage, I linked in my video, and I watched it perhaps for the first time all the way through anyways. I don't even know, but there's some things that watching that film helped to bring to mind some relevant issues of the archetypes that we're talking about. And in my last video, I mentioned this stuff about Byung and territorial pissing or whatever, but I didn't really give the context to that one. I didn't really put it into... it's kind of like loose a bit, but I think there's something about using that idea with the online sphere. And I have to, before I get into that though, I think I should qualify it with a sort of a criticism I do really like reading Byung-Chul Han, I must admit, but one of the things that I find about Byung-Chul Han is that when he's talking about the internet, one of the things that he points out is how, given Facebook, for example, Facebook only has like a like button, and there isn't really, you can do an angry react or a sad react or these kinds of things, but it's not really like this they're trying to promote a kind of a positivity, and even the reactions are kind of seen as even like positive reactions, like you're expressing an emotion, there's still considered to be positivity, in the sense that, like, even if you react negatively, it's still kind of a positive thing, like you're getting people sympathy by giving you the sad face or something like this, right? But the main thing about... And then you can also see on YouTube too, where they have a dislike button on YouTube, but they've hidden it so that what you see is the numbers of likes minus the number of dislikes, but they don't show you, like, every time somebody dislikes your video, they don't give you notifications saying that people don't like you or something, like they're basically trying to create a positive environment where all the negativity has been smoothed out, so that if there's a kind of the friction that comes with dealing with other people is kind of taken out of it, right? And that, while that may seem like a good thing in some way, Byung-Chul Han is very critical of this, because he says that there's a certain essential kind of negativity or friction that's important to include, and that when I was talking about the territorial pissing thing, what he was saying, to put it in more of a context, was that in the world of social media, that it's all about liking and it's all about sharing, and that he in I think it's Non-Things that I got this one from, and I don't have the book right on hand, so I'm not going to read out of it. I'm just going to go by memory. But he was talking also about spitting in the soup, which is all the spitting in the soup is actually even probably works better with the Mars Neptune thing. But he was saying that like there's this idea of spitting in the soup that you to market as your own, that people aren't going to eat your soup because you spat in it. Right, not to be spitting on, and it could be also be like the waiter who doesn't like the customer could spit into his soup or something. That could be another form of it. But the way he was talking about it was to mark. This is the whole thing. Like soup again is something that is kind of amorphous. When you have a big soup pot and you could be pouring it out to different bowls or something like this. Right, there's the idea of what is uniform or unitary in one, or blended together, versus trying to say, hey, this bowl of soup is my soup, you don't eat my soup, right? And that it's kind of funny though, in a sense, growing up in the 90s, which I was trying to talk about with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, I kind of feel like there's this sort of background cultural thing going on where there was a big emphasis on like the unity culture or something like that. And what we're getting now is a kind of a kickback in some way. But the idea of there's complicated political issues like globalization, right? Which I mentioned a little bit. But I feel like it's hard to make these videos because I got bogged down in talking about globalization in terms of like globalized aesthetics and cafes, which is kind of like that's only a very small, narrow part of the conversation, right? And just the different things, ideas come to mind. But in a larger sense, this idea of there's on one hand the territories of different nations and different groups and stuff like this, and that of course we want people to live together and not have so much friction with each other that they're at warring with each other and having violent conflicts or something. That's no good, right? But the thing is that the process of what Deleuze and Guattari talk about as deterritorialization, where there were different structures which created different groups, like let's say class systems or caste systems or whatever structures people into groups. Not saying that they're, without judging it necessarily as being a bad thing or a good thing, but just say that this is something that is in our society. Maybe it has some problems with it, but when we get rid of it entirely, and all these sort of structures and divisions and stuff like that, and it's just sort of a smoothed out surface where we're all just people, man, and it's all equal, right? But then there's certain things where the need for some sort of differentiation is still there. There's a need to spit in the soup. There's a need to mark something off as your territory. And to put it another way, if we bring it the globalization in the sense of, if you rewind back to what McLuhan was talking about. Now, McLuhan was talking about this stuff, giving lectures on TV when my mom was just a kid or whatever, right? So generationally, an older guy, born in around the turn of the century anyways, right? But the process of globalization, he was also talking about the media process of globalization, which I think we take it for granted in some way, that we live a life where there's so much exposure. Like if I wanted to talk to my friends in other countries, I could just talk instantly to friends in other countries, and it's like as if maybe even more convenient than trying to talk to a person in my own neighborhood, right? And there's kind of the issue, I think, also, if you bring this into, let's say, market dynamics of running a business or something. It's kind of funny as being an astrologer, because instead of being like, you could look at it in different ways, seeing like have local astrology communities, to look at where I am geographically, to be like, oh, I'm in the West Coast I'm in the greater Vancouver area, and I have a certain kind of camaraderie with my local astrologers. Like I know Ren Butler, I've never met in person, but I talked to him on the internet, but he's in my area. I know my friend Lori is in my area. There's people like, okay, I'm based in this area, and we've got friends in this area, and we've got a community in this area, versus that you can contrast that with a situation where you've got a globalized marketplace, where it's like, if I'm looking for clients, it doesn't really matter where I am at all. It just, like, I could be doing clients from India, I could be doing clients from Europe, I could be doing clients from Japan. The only issue is now like language barrier, for example, right? Or there's also interesting that there's different barriers with, let's say, China, that China has its own entire social media system, right? But there's this whole thing about a globalized system where it's, first of all, if you start to get the feel for what I'm talking about, is that local communities have a kind of, this more homegrown, familiar, you kind of know the people you're dealing with, whereas you kind of got this thing with the internet where you're like worried about catfishing. Like, how do I really even know anybody is who they say they are online, and how do I know I'm not getting ripped off, and how do I, like, you got people impersonating other people online and stuff like this, right? But you've got this thing where it's like, everybody is competing with everybody else, not just at people doing something in a little community where there's little, like, this is the guy who's got experience, and this is the new guy, and this is the people in this little thing, but just like this free-for-all where it's all been smoothed out and everybody's just going at it, and let's just put all the astrologers online in this one arena and just have everybody, and then you've got something like Facebook, and I see a lot of us people complaining about all the, it's like, well, what do you think's gonna happen if you have that? Of course it ends up being a mess, right? It's like, obviously social media ends up being a mess, and that's what I'm trying to say, is that you've got to try to combine a bunch of these ideas, which I think go with the Mars-Neptune transit, is that there's, for one thing, the idea, when I'm talking about a kind of a positivity culture, where they're trying to structure online media in such a way where you can only like things, you can only be positive about it. You can, and it's also designed so that everything you're making should be made with maximum shareability, right? In that, so Byung was saying that, like, the spitting in the soup, there's no spitting in the soup in online media, saying, but maybe there is, right? Maybe there's all this stuff coming up where there's sort of factional, or there's certain tribal attitudes, or there's ideological divisions and stuff like that. But the thing is, this is the kind of the Mars-Neptune problem, is that on one hand, there's no boundaries at all, and if you're just putting things out there publicly, anybody can watch this video, right? Even if there's people, if I've got people that I have major problems with in my life, like if I have some, if somebody was doing YouTube videos and they had, let's say, a bad relationship, and now they're crazy, or I don't want to, whatever, let's just keep it neutral, right? But let's just say there's like, if you've got a restraining order on somebody and you're making a vlog or something like that, then if you could block people's accounts and stuff like that, but what's to stop somebody from just logging off and then just being like, oh, well, I'll just watch all your videos logged off and you can't stop me because you're just doing public stuff. And as long as you're things like stalkers and stuff like that, you're like, there's absolutely no way you can filter who watches your stuff or not, right? Or, it's kind of weird if you look at it like that. So there's this kind of idea of the issues around exposure being totally open versus being totally private. And what's really funny, actually, is that to listen to this McLuhan stuff, McLuhan is talking about privacy historically. And McLuhan kind of does these things called probes. So at some point in time, you have to acknowledge whether or not McLuhan is accurate or right about what he's saying. Well, whatever. Let's just get into it. But he was suggesting, anyways, that historically the whole idea of privacy is actually a kind of a new thing, because privacy is dependent on certain architectural structures. He was saying that that people dwelling in such a way to have private spaces, to have private things going on, to be separate from other people, that in some way that could be seen as a kind of a luxury, that maybe if you were peasants or something like that, that you may live in a kind of a group communal dwelling, and you may not have, or you could also say, I don't know about indigenous people, but one of the things that they talk about in Deleuze and Guattari is this idea of communal housing for indigenous people, and that there's this kind of thing about the colonizers having this idea of, one of the first things we have to do is make sure that these people don't live in big communal, they have these big log houses where everybody just lives in the same house. We can't have that. We have to split everybody out so that the community is fractured and atomized and separated. And then, we can separate the kids from their families and traumatize them and try to, put our colonial culture on them. There's this sort of divide and conquer mentality, as you understand, right? And so there's this kind of whole idea that the whole idea of privacy is kind of something indicative of certain culture that has, first of all, the power to structure something in a certain way where people are individualized, whereas in different modes of human organization, that may be a contingent factor, basically. The atomization and individualization of the independent units making up a society may not necessarily be the first and foremost operating system of how we have to run things, that it may actually be a contingent expression of whatever the cultural norm, and that we've created a thing where we've got this now it's a really exaggerated thing where we're all just in our own little worlds, and whatever we interact with if we're not interacting with our own real life material community in our grounded world around us, we're interacting in a online social sphere which is basically determined by people like I talked to my mom about the problem of Facebook, and my mom says, no, Dan, there's no problem with Facebook, because I can just pick all the things I don't like and tell it not to show me that, and all I get to see is all the stuff I like. And what Byung is saying is that, yeah, that is the problem with Facebook, that is the problem with social media, because the more you do this, the more you have an experience where your experience of the world around you is only the stuff you want to hear, only the stuff you want to see, and every time somebody mentions something you don't want to talk about, you say no and you block them, and you start living in this bubble where you don't have any tolerance for anything that creates any friction, and you only have to. It's like the echo chambers and all this stuff like this. There's the problem, anyways, is when as I see it as an astrologer, is that the Mars energy, which obviously the Mars can be a problem because Mars can be aggressive and Mars can be whatever. It goes with the stuff where people call toxic masculinity, right? But I think that the toxicity of it has to do with like when you only allow positivity to be expressed, then what is judged to be negative, which could also, it's the same thing as I was saying, like, maybe like body odor or something like that. Maybe body odor is neutral, but because it has a natural Marsy, pungent, kind of noxious quality, we judge it to be negative. But maybe these things actually play a role in the grand scheme of things. But when we have, it's kind of like, it reminds me, there's a punk rock album, the XRAY SPEX, the germ-free adolescence, right? That we have, in some way, we have a Facebook, if you have a sanitized, sterilized environment, there's some sort of, funky thing that is not going to fit into that. Doesn't have anywhere to go, and it's looking for a way to express itself. And that's why we see so much like toxicity in online communication and stuff like that. And we also see the big problem here I'm concerned about. I was trying to talk about doing like anti-fascist astrology or something like that. But when you put mass media together with this displaced Mars that doesn't have anywhere to go, it's all positive, only what you like, and you can't say anything, can't create friction, can't have any conflict, and we're going to smooth all that out, then there's a risk of the need to assert some kind of tribalism, to say this is us, not you, this is what we like, not what you like. And I kind of feel like this is where you get the whole the manosphere stuff about, like, being being confrontational just for the sake of being confrontational, or being like, all those, politically correct people. We're gonna just piss them off just for the hell of it, just because we can. Like this kind of just being defiant just for the sake of being defiant, or just being offensive just for the sake of being offensive, or not wanting to adapt to the whatever is. Regardless of, I'm not trying to make the argument of like it's good to be that way, or that there's not reasons why you should temper it out, or I'm just trying to say the energy. If you get to the archetype doesn't know the difference in some way between all these different expressions on the different political companies. It just sees Mars stuff. Mars wants to be Mars. It doesn't, you can be on this side of the argument or that side of the argument, but you still want to piss people off and be noxious and toxic online. And it's like, there's this, I feel like it's just like, the imbalance between the positivity, our need for a totally positive space, and not knowing what to do with this element that just doesn't, that we want to sanitize out of everything, right? And the thing, it's like it also reminds me of this parable that I think it comes from. It's like, if you're going to tell the truth, first you tie up your camel, because the truth pisses people off, right? But and you might have to run away on your camel if you tell people the truth. But the thing is that it's like, the issue with this is that the Mars Neptune is that the truth is stained in some way. It's like, there's like, the truth is not just a neutral thing. There's often going to be something in there which rubs people the wrong way, because they've built their sandcastles on something that's going to dissolve if they let too much truth in or something. You know what I mean? Like, the truth going to have an acidic, corrosive effect with this Mars Neptune, and people want to protect themselves and be, oh no, I can't take that position anymore. Oh, I have to give up that argument. Oh, I have to, because the more truth you let it, oh shit, I gotta, I can't be a bitch about that anymore. It's like, people, there's a lot of hostility, towards preventing that kind of surrender, basically, right? And I think the whole issue about this, the need for positivity and stuff like this, is that there's, with also Neptune, if you look at the spiritual thing about Neptune, right, the people always talk about the transcendent qualities of Neptune. There's this basic thing that you see in religion, where in Buddhism they talk about dukkha, or the first noble truth of life and life is suffering, or the suffering that's in life and stuff like that. And it reminds me that, my family raised me Unitarian, and they never were really the most Christian family. Although, what can I say? I did find a Bible in my house, and that there were some notes in it or something. Maybe my dad read a bit of the Bible, but we're not really the most Christian family. What can I say, right? But growing up, I also often encountered all of these, reasons or why people have resistances to religion, and that Christianity presented as this really awful thing or whatever, right? And one of the things that I often had that would come up, right, is the topic of original sin, and being like, how awful is it to have a religion where just on the default, you haven't even done anything wrong, and you're just bad by default, right? And although, to be honest, I think that it's like, there's this kind of weird kind of fundamental tension between Christianity and Buddhism, because in Buddhism, at least my understanding anyways, is that there's kind of a sense of essential basic goodness, right? That everything is fundamentally good, and because the what would you call it? I want to say bodhicitta. I don't even know if I'm using the right word. There's the awareness of the suchness of things and the way and all that. It's good. It's like there's a good awareness, and to know suffering is in some way to also know the truth of suffering, is to know the releasement of suffering, is to know the way, and to have compassion and all. And it's good, right? It's all good in Buddhism in some sense, right? But in Christianity, there's this thing of like that we are fundamentally flawed and wretched, and there's this good thing that we can never reach, and we have to constantly hit ourselves and stuff like this. And there's a certain side of Christianity that I think people don't like, because if you read Christian mystics, they're very self-deprecating, right? And but in Buddhism, they say, they also say to make yourself small in Buddhism. That it's the whole trying to get over the ego thing is to be humble, is to make your not to be big, not to build yourself up, to be modest and to be small. And it's actually, if you put that together with the Christian thing, I feel like they're not saying such different things, but there's something that comes out. This is the Mars Neptune square thing, that you can pick up this hint of something in Christianity, which to me maybe puts people off because it doesn't sound healthy. It sounds like an unhealthy form of self-deprecation, of even like self-abuse or something, that is sort of an internalized self-oppression or internalized. But there's also some truth in it too, I feel, which is like, if you look around, we are actually flawed people, that we can in the Buddhist thing of the great perfection, it's all perfect. But there's some other, but if you don't see that it's all perfect, there's some, we may not all be experiencing the great perfection 100% of the time, day to day, and maybe in our own inability, maybe it's all perfect except for our own ignorance to see that. But our own ignorance to see that is then the original sin, right? And then our own wretchedness and our lowness, and it's like to me, I feel like Buddhism and Christianity are talking about the same thing, but approaching it from different angles. But there's this thing but nonetheless, my point though is that there's something about it which is like, you got to be careful not to play the game of just, you're like, well, look, these guys say this thing and these guys say this thing, and so if there's some sort of like painful, difficult thing, like there's something uncomfortable I don't like about the Christian thing, so that'll make me just go bounce off to the Buddhist thing. And then, but if there's something you don't like about the Buddhist thing and you just bounce off, and you play this game where you're just zigzag, doing the circle 8 between two things, the issue is like, is that resolving the differences between them, or is that using a kind of rather than surrendering, you're doing a clever zigzag of evasive maneuver to avoid the truth by zigzagging across as many different systems as possible, so that the truth you don't want to face doesn't bite you in the ass. Like I don't know. It's something to consider, anyways, right? So those are some thoughts for Mars Neptune, and the sun, the sun Cazimi with Neptune and Mercury squaring Mars. Who knows? I'm just kind of like on a roll with it. I don't know if there's any other ideas I should try to fit in here, but I'm just going to leave it at this for now. It's about half an hour. Thank you very much. I'll be back with more. Like and subscribe. And also, thanks for, some people have been giving kind comments on the YouTube channel, supporting my work, saying they don't know why I'm not any more popular than I am and stuff, which is, whatever. I don't know how to answer this, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you for the support. And a lot of people also say, Dan, you're the kind of guy who really doesn't care what people think. And I'm like, I actually do kind of care. I do like being supported. I do like people telling me they're watching my stuff. It does help. I mean, I'm not completely impervious to the opinions of others. I do like to know that there's people out there watching the channel, and it's encouraging to see that we're getting more, or I'm getting more subscribers, I should say. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. Okay.